Welcome everyone to our very first episode. Today it's all about migrations. Enjoy! My name is Nishan Naicker and I am a cloud solution architect focusing on SAP on Azure. I work for Microsoft and I've been in this current role for the past year and a half at least, and I really love what I do. In the past, I worked for SAP directly for approximately 13 years as a basis consultant, a pre-sales consultant, and other roles such as middleware, as well as SAP S4, public cloud and private cloud. I have just little over 18 years of SAP experience, and I love this niche role that I have where I can couple my SAP skill set with now the Microsoft Azure skill sets. So I'm very honored and privileged to now hand over to both of my other colleagues, also from Microsoft, first starting with Prasenjit, who will introduce himself.
Thank you, Nis. My name is Prasenjit. I'm also a cloud solution architect working at Microsoft Sweden. I've been with Microsoft around a little over than 3.5 years. Our primary role is to help our customer and guiding them the best practices and the recommendation that comes jointly from Microsoft and SAP when the SAP workload getting migrated from on-premise to the cloud. So we work as a quality gatekeeper to ensure that whenever you are thinking about migrating your workload, you follow all the best practices and the guidelines from us. So that's pretty much me and my role. I will hand it over to my colleague Sambit for his introduction.
Thanks, Prasenjit. Hello, everyone. My name is Sambit. I'm a technical program manager at Microsoft. I work in the Azure Global CSI SAP engineering team. I have around 17 years of SAP basis experience, especially in the area of end-to-end SAP installations, OSDB migrations, and SAP upgrades and import conversions.
Thank you guys for the introductions. Now let's shift gears and move into our topics for discussion. Firstly, just before we go into that topic, let me tell you a little bit of a story. I'm not sure if you have actually heard of the wildebeest migration, the spectacular event that happens in Tanzania at the Serengeti National Park. Prasenjit, Sambit?
No.
Any idea? No? Okay, so I think you are missing something really, really cool here, right? So this event happens during the course of the year. And what happens is that people go out there just to have a look and see this migration and how they're happening in the thousands, in the 10,000s, right? It's just amazing to see something so significant and beautiful, right? It just catches your eye. Now, a lot of people ask, why do these wildebeest migrate? Well, essentially what they're doing is they're migrating to follow the rain so that they can actually get good food, right? So the food would be like lush green grass. So wherever there's rain, there's lush green grass. So as you can expect, they are migrating just to survive. And there's a saying that the grass is always greener on the other side. I mean, that is so evident in this type of migration process. Now, based on that image that you have right now, let us dig deeper into exactly what we want to focus on when we talk about migration. I know for a fact that a lot of you are thinking about, hey, you know what? We have our on-prem systems, our SAP workloads, our business relies on this, but we can do better. How do we move to the cloud? Now, I think in this episode, really what we want to achieve here is to give you the simplified way to move into Azure. And by giving you this understanding of what the simplified way or process is, we want to actually talk a little bit and share our knowledge around some of the topics. Some of the topics will be things such as a landing zone, where we focus on, hey, can we give you that foundation for you to move your workloads into Azure? What's in this landing zone? So I'll talk a little bit about that. The next topic would be around assessment and sizing, where my colleague Prasenjit will talk around this. So his focus is really around the methodology around this. How can Microsoft support you to move your workloads into the cloud? What does the on-prem system look like, and how do we map this into the cloud? And then we drill down and shift gears into sizing. Many of you are familiar with the terminology where if you think about SAP sizing, the SAP Quick Sizer tool, right? CPU, memory, SAPs, brilliant. So we still use that, but extend that to a different type of approach as well. We'll talk to you about that. And then lastly, to end, we'll talk to you really about the experience from Microsoft on how we migrate to the Azure platform, right? So different types of methodologies around that. So essentially different types of export, import, heterogeneous, homogeneous copies, but there's also something new that's coming out that's in preview as well, which might spark your interest. We'll keep it as a surprise for later. Now, shifting gears, right? I mean, you guys would appreciate that when you build a house, the most important part is actually making sure that you get that foundation and structure in place, because the entire house is going to be built on this foundation and structure. Do you agree? Yes? No?
Yeah.
Highly
Yes.
critical part. Yeah, highly critical. So if I had to consider what would be some of the important things here, making sure that you have the structure available to build plumbing on top of that, right? Things such as electrical, right? Water inlets, water outlets. These are just some of the examples. These are, you call them like prerequisites, right? Before you actually start building the rest of the stuff on top of that. If I had to shift gears and give you an idea in terms of what Microsoft provides in Azure when it comes to things such as making sure that we are prepped, we are ready, bring in your SAP workloads, because now we can simplify your entire deployment into Azure by just making sure that we have the foundation, we have the structure, we have the plumbing, we have the electrical available, right? But in the form of different components. For example, you would need a subscription, right? So this subscription in Azure is where you would actually go and deploy your SAP workloads. You deploy it into this. It treat almost like a container, so to speak. Now, I must give you just a quick example. I was dealing with a customer recently, and they were actually looking at Azure doing the backups for their on-premise environment. They were obviously considering still moving into Azure, but they just needed a backup first. And what we actually had to do was entertain a discussion around landing zones, because they didn't have the prerequisites around network connectivity in place, such as an express route. So an express route is a really fast connection, a service provided by Azure, where it actually allows you to connect between on-prem and Azure in a fast way, so we can get the backups going and things like that, right? Other components, recently, actually just a few days ago, I was speaking to customers about setting up a clustering in the environment and in Azure, and they wanted to use the availability set concept, right? So availability sets is essentially a duplicate VMs sitting in one single data center. You would normally use this if you have a lower SLA, right? You would normally go to availability zones, which is a separate data center. Now, in each region in Azure, we have basically the possibility to go and deploy your VMs in 3 zones, right? So each region has 3 zones. So each of these zones will be treated as different different data centers. Availability sets is basically duplicate VMs in one data center. So we actually architected the solution for the customer. They were extremely impressed. They were happy with the latency. They were happy with the performance. We also looked at things such as Azure file shares. They said, hey, we want to get rid of our on-prem file servers. So a simple file share such as, if you look at the SAP landscape, it's things such as SAP MNT, user SAP Trans. This is just some of the examples, but you can also use like replace your on-premise file servers with Azure files, or even Azure NetApps, which is a much more comprehensive solution around this. So things such as virtual network peering. I may be going into quite a lot of stuff here, but a lot of these things are catered for already in Azure, right? Backups, recovery services vault is where you'll store your most of your backup data. We have different types of policies. We have Azure DNS, Azure Firewall, and the list goes on. So we have this comprehensive solution in Azure customized for SAP workloads. And many of the engagements that we've been working with, we use this landing zone concept. So flowing from that and shifting gears, the next important part is really around assessment. And Prasenjit will be covering this, including the sizing. Over to you, Prasenjit.
Thank you, Nis. You brought up a couple of very important topics here. And now I will try to give you some idea that what a actual SAP migration project look like. We have seen when we work, we actually work closely with the customers and partners. We have seen maybe they are rushing with the migration. They're only concentrating on the migration. And when you are coming from on-premise world to the cloud world, there are many things that has changed. So you have opportunity to improvise. You also have opportunity to refactor some of your SAP architecture, the components. So therefore, it is very essential that you go through all the stages that we are laying out in terms of what is in it for a migration of SAP landscape. So we came forward with 5 different stages that you might need to go through. The first stage starts with discovery. Discovery is a very important stage before you start migrating your SAP landscape from on-premise to Azure. What it entails, basically, you have to discover your current SAP landscape or estate. You need to document the core SAP components, integrations, their customizations. All you have to do is capturing your personalized content and the integration scenarios with SAP or non-SAP world within your IT systems. Then you have to define your goal because you would like to come from X to Y. So as I said, there is a possibility to improvise your current architecture or refactor your architecture. So you have to come up with a defined goal that what you would like to go with. And then you have to determine the key stakeholders. This is very important because until and unless you have a person who is responsible for a landscape or defining the key task, then it's very difficult to actually measure the performance indicators and all the other things, which is very essential. And then finally, you do review some content which is available in our documentation, and this has been jointly prepared by SAP, Microsoft, and several ISV partners. We call them as a market approved journey. So depending on which industry you are on, you can come from supply chain or you can come from retail, or there are many different market approved journey architecture available in our documentation. So we suggest to review them and understand at what context that could be a little bit of similarity of your landscape, and you can take some inspiration from there. Then the next phase of this migration process is the prepare. So as it sounds, it means that you have to prepare something. You have to, let's say you have to prepare the how your landscape will be looking like compared to your on-premise infrastructure. So you need to do some sizing, and I mean sizing exercise. You need to know the bill of material. And then when it comes to sizing, we normally prefer to do the right size because in the cloud, you don't need to anticipate, let's say 3 years growth or something, because you can get the new infrastructure with a button of a click. So you don't need to think about what would be your data growth after 3 years, and I have to cater all those things when I'm sizing my infrastructure. That's not the case in the cloud. Then, as I said, we also do have some technical reference architecture. So though, I mean, this is available in the public documentation, we highly recommend to leverage those architecture to understand that how you will consider the clustering of different type of database workload or different type of application servers, what type of data protection that you put up in place in the architecture. So it's a very good place to visit. Then once you have done all this preparation, you will come up with the draft planning, right? For example, what would be for the business continuity? What would be for the cutover window, and what are the dependencies, and how you will test it to make sure that everything is working as per your expectation, and how your organization would be ready to embark into the new SAP world. So these all comes into the preparation phase. If you execute the preparation pretty well, then migration or the execution part would be very, very simple. Here, you actually realize that your migration plan, and you have to communicate to the business. So business gives you approval that, yeah, now it's the time to do the migration. So this time you will deploy the environment. And there you can utilize, as Nish highlighted, that we have landing zone accelerator for SAP, which we also provide some tool sets in order to deploy your infrastructure automatically. You can also do some testing in order to set that recovery and the performance indicator to just validate that it's setting up to your expectation or not. And then you finally bring other technologies to migrate. For example, I think my colleague Sambit will touch upon those points, whether you will use the classic migration tool, or you will use the DMO depending on your migration path. So once you've done the migration, then you are putting into your SAP system onto the cloud, and you are moving into operationalize phase that we call as run. So in the run, you are concentrating on, or you should concentrate on, optimize the landscape. So in the cloud world, when I say that optimizing the infrastructure means you don't need to provide or you don't over provision storage, you don't over provision the compute or the memory. So you only utilize the thing, you only, according to utilization, you try to resize or you try to upscale your infrastructure for SAP landscape. And then you also need to incorporate the new updates, because we are constantly investing in our cloud platform. We are coming up with a new tool set, new features, services that probably would be beneficial for your SAP system to run on. And then finally, the other Azure services, which is cloud native, comes from our PaaS or SaaS portfolio. Try to leverage those, because in that sense, you don't need to manage and maintain the solution itself. For example, you can take a look at the Azure monitoring for SAP solution. We recently also gone with public preview for Azure Sentinel for SAP. We do also have solution for the backup in the transactional area, so you can take the backup of HANA, SQL, Oracle, and the list goes on. And we are continuously, we are doing this investment to put more tools and services for your SAP landscape on Azure. The final stage of your migration journey is the innovate. So we say never settle, because there are many other things which you never imagined in your on-premise world. Now it's possible in the cloud. We have different other tool sets which were never before utilized. For example, Azure Power Platform. So that actually comes a very good integration scenario, and that gives you more power to operate your SAP landscape and spreading them into the root level of your organization. Let's take an example. So you are running some retail solution, SAP solution, and you want your employees working at the boutique shop, they would like to update about the status that the items they are seeing in the rack. But they do not have the computer or the laptop access individually, but they have a cell phone access or some sort of touch devices access. And in order to have them to provide input into SAP system, how they will do that, how the interaction will happen. So here the Power Platform playing a very important role, so that you can create a very simple form, which essentially would be used by the field workers at the shops. And that input would be translated, or it would be coming into the SAP via the Power Platform. There are numerous examples, there are numerous scenarios that you can think about. Something has not been explored maybe until now, and there are enormous possibilities. So that's what we call let's innovate. So innovate is kind of you are diving into the unexplored area that to make sure that your landscape is the most smartest one in the world. And yeah, let's now take a look about how to size, because this is one of the basic thing when you move your SAP landscape. So when you do the sizing, there are many different paths that you do size of your SAP landscape. So one path is you are going with as is migration. So there is no changes in the application area. Or there could be a scenario that you are moving from Business Suite on HANA to S4HANA. There could be a scenario that you are moving from any DB SAP to S4HANA. So there are many guidelines that comes from SAP that you have to run specific report in order to understand that what would be the sizing for your target landscape. But in a nutshell, I mean, there are 2-3 ways, I would say. So one thing is the quick sizer. If you start as new in the Azure cloud, then you go with the quick sizer. And if you are coming as a brownfield, then you have other reports. You definitely need to take a look into the EWA report, and then you compare the relevant infrastructure, predominantly the compute and the storage, what are available in the cloud. And finally, you will get list, consolidated list of your entire landscape. You can call it as a bill of material. And then you finally prepare that what would be the target size of the SAP landscape. So mainly I would recommend or we would recommend to consult a couple of notes that are available. One of the note are very popular is 1928533. So that provides you the guidance about what are the services and the products are certified or is utilized by the SAP landscape. So let's now take a look at the methodologies for the migration. And with that, I will hand it over to my expert colleague, Sambit, on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Prasenjit, and thank you to both of you for setting the context for a customer embarking on a cloud transformation journey. So we talked about landing zone, we talked about the different phases, the different stages in an migration assessment program. We also talked about sizing. Now let's talk about the migration phase, the migrate phase. So for SAP ERP customers running their SAP workload, which includes SAP, non-SAP, and various third-party applications in the on-premise data center, generally there are 4 paths to migrate their workload to Microsoft Azure. Path A is the lift and shift to cloud, which is the brownfield approach, wherein customers migrate their SAP workload to Microsoft Azure as is without any changes. Cloud and the reduction in the total cost of ownership of IT are the main drivers here. This is the first step from customer in the cloud transformation journey from where they can plan a migration to SAP HANA or an S4 HANA. So generally, some customers take this as an opportunity to re-architect some of their solution components, like they can upgrade their Oracle database or an HANA database in the process, or they can move from a multi-node Oracle system or a HANA scale-out system to a single node VM. So those kind of re-architecting can be done for some of the solution components. Path B is the lift and shift, migrate to cloud, which is the brownfield approach, wherein the customers migrate their SAP workload to Azure and change the OS or DB or both in the process, thereby saving on the DB licensing part. For example, customer migrating their SAP system running on Oracle to a SQL Server to save on the licensing cost. Path C is the lift and shift, migrate to HANA in cloud, which is again a brownfield approach, wherein customers migrate some of their SAP workload to HANA. Path D is the greenfield approach, which is either a new SAP S4HANA implementation combined with the data migration, an S4HANA conversion, or an S4HANA consolidation, which includes a new SAP S4HANA installation and data migration from multiple ERP systems. The table here lists down all the possible migration options and their use cases. So we have different migration options like backup, restore, database replication, export, import using R3 load. We have DMO, and we also have the near zero downtime offering from SAP. The way to read the table is in the use case context. For example, the database application mechanism may have a lower downtime than DMO, but DMO is also doing an upgrade along with the migration. Homogeneous migration has lower flexibility in terms of OS and database at the target, but if you are already using it, say Linux with an SAP HANA database, you don't necessarily care about the flexibility because both are currently supported and are in support roadmap for any new application versions going forward. For migrating SAP workload, we can do it using either the classical migration way by running SWPM in the source system, copy the data, and import it in the target system by running SWPM. Parallel export import can also be used to minimize the downtime for some of the very large databases. Then there is also the SAP DMO option in the SUM tool, which can be used for the conversion of to SAP S4HANA. SAP DMO with system move combined with an parallel export import is used for a simplified single-step upgrade and migration to SAP S4HANA. And we also have this offering, which was a joint initiative by SAP and Microsoft, which is known as SAP DMO to Azure option in the SUM tool, which is available on the available on request basis to customers. They can raise an OSS message and get the tool, get the SUM tool requested from SAP. And this is basically applicable for customer with a database footprint of less than 5 terabytes who are running ERP on NADB. So it supports single-step conversion of ERP to S4HANA in a single-step process.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you, Sambit. Thank you, Prasenjit, for your very insightful view. And I thought that was really, really good. And I hope you've enjoyed it as well. This is kind of like a taste of what's to come. And I'm sure with the three of us on board and the further episodes to follow, you would find many of the sessions extremely insightful. Just to summarize, we spoke about the migration process in general. We started off with the foundation and mapping that to the Azure Landing Zone. Then we spoke a lot about the assessment and the sizing. And lastly, to end up, we spoke about the different ways around how you would actually migrate into Azure in a very simplified way. Thank you for your interest. We look forward to sharing more of this important, valuable information in the upcoming episodes. So stay tuned. Thank you and goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Cheers.